Broadcasting live from somewhere in the Shadow Realm, this is YuGiOh Duel Links Talk. Here's your host, Doug Dimmadoo.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of YuGiOh Duel Links Talk. Today we're going to look at a pretty unique deck that I think really does a good job utilizing that second copy of Swift Gaia, the Fierce Knight. Overall, this looks like a pretty cool deck that has some big-time potential. So, basically the whole setup of this deck, and I'm going to start going through the cards, is utilizing a character that uses the skill Balance. That way you're at least going to start each duel with potentially just one monster in your hand, because this one only runs 5 monsters, and just kind of given the ratio of stuff, I think more likely than not, if you run Balance, you will only start with one monster in your hand. The rest of this deck, all spell cards, and we're going to go through them, but first I want to start off with the staple. You got the 2 copies of Swift Gaia, the Fierce Knight. It's level 7 warrior, 2300 attack, 2100 defense. If this is the only card in your hand, you can normal summon it without tributing. So the key to getting this card out is having a ton of spell cards that you don't necessarily need to keep in your hand. You're able to play them all, and knowing that you're going to have a ton of spell cards really puts you in good position to be able to summon that Swift Gaia, the Fierce Knight, should you end up in that position. So the next card we have here is Theban Nightmare. It's a level 4 fiend with 1500 attack and 500 defense. While you have no cards in your hand nor in your spell and trap zones, this card gains 1500 attack. So overall, this card, as long as you're just playing typical spell cards, more often than not, Theban Nightmare is going to be just a really powerful fiend for you to have. So anyway, moving forward, let's go into the spell cards that are involved here. You're going to have Archfiend Labyrinth. It's a field spell card where all fiend-type monsters you control gain 500 attack. You can target one Archfiend monster you control and banish one other fiend-type monster you control, and if you do, special summon from your hand, deck, or graveyard one Archfiend monster with the same level as the targeted monster. You can only use this effect of Archfiend Labyrinth once per turn. And I know that you're able to get 2 copies of that from the more recent event, so running those 2 copies in this deck is helpful, because if you have Theban Nightmare to start, you're going to at least know that monster is going to have 2000 attack just based off of the attack increase of having this card. So yeah, overall, not bad. Then you got 3 copies of Goblin Thief. You inflict 500 points of damage to your opponent's life points and increase your life points by 500 points. So you're draining your opponent's life points, you're gaining your own. This card you can get from going up against Bandit Keith as legendary duelist, and some of those drops, you will be able to get Goblin Thief out of that. So just another really good card. It's not one that has to stay on the field. You play it and you use it. Then there's, I see 3 copies of Hinotama. You inflict 500 damage to your opponent. So again, just a card that you play and you get it out of your hand. Kind of the whole point if you want to get your Swift Gaia, the Fierce Knight, or if you want to maximize Theban Nightmare's effect. So yeah, play that card. Then you also got Soul of the Pure. 3 copies of this card allows you to increase your life points by 800 points. So yeah, this is just a whole fun deck where you're trying to increase your own life points and decrease your opponent's life points at the same time, but also while running a copy of Cup of Ace. Now, this deck runs 3 copies of Cup of Ace, but what this one does is if you toss a coin and it lands on heads, you draw 2 cards, and if it lands on tails, your opponent draws 2 cards. And then finally, you end up with 1 copy of Restructor Revolution, where you inflict 200 points of damage to your opponent's life points for each card in your opponent's hand. So if your opponent's filling up their hand, maybe you run into a few copies of Cup of Ace, and it keep on landing on your opponent, and your opponent ends up keep on drawing cards, then you use your Restructor Revolution, and you burn them for some serious damage that way. But as you can see here, all these cards between Goblin Thief, Hinotama, the Soul of the Pure, and Cup of Ace, as well as the Restructor Revolution, they don't stay on the field, which is why it sets up so perfect for your Theban Nightmare to hopefully sit there with a 3000 attack on your field, because you're going to have no cards in your hand, nor are you going to have anything in your spell and trap card zone. Now, what I'm not sure, because I haven't actually played this deck yet, and I'm actually going to be experimenting with it. I do have all the pieces for this deck, but I wonder if Archfiend Labyrinth kind of negates the effect of Theban Nightmare, because if it does, then you're sitting at a 2000 attack monster, but if it doesn't, then you're sitting at a 3500 attack monster, so that would be a pretty crazy setup there. So it's just something to consider, but again, Just the whole strategy of this deck is to utilize balance, start with one monster and the rest of your hand spell cards. Then just go play your cards from there. And in your first turn, you should be able to get a pretty powerful monster on the field rather quickly, whether it's Theban Nightmare or if it's Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight. So, yeah, overall, give this deck a shot. This one's currently listed in the deck board for beginners, and because a lot of the cards are really not that difficult to get a hold of. Now, granted, Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight and the Archfiend Palabyrinth are two cards that were very difficult to acquire, but you had to get them through events, and I think you get your one copy of Swift Gaia the Fierce Knight from leveling up Yami Yugi. But other than that, all these cards here, because Goblin Thief is a rare card, Hinotama is a rare card, Soul of the Pure is a rare card, Cup of Ace is a common card, and Restructor Revolution is a common card as well. And also, too, keep in mind that Theban Nightmare is also a common card, so you're able to acquire those 3 copies rather quickly for this deck. And it's a pretty simple, straightforward layout. The strategy is very simple. If you're running into an opponent who has a lot of spell negations, this deck still doesn't necessarily spell out the end of the world for you, because the whole point is that you're trying to clear your hand as quickly as possible. Now, I know I've seen tons of deck builds that go handless and they utilize Flash Assassin. But honestly, I think having Theban Nightmare in this scenario with this type of deck is just so much better, because you get a lot more powerful potential, because it seems like the Flash Assailant there really kind of outgrew its I guess its strength, because it really only kind of maxes out at 2,000 attack when you're completely handless, if you have no cards in your hand at that point. But it seems like the ceiling is much higher for Nightmare. I think it's just a really good setup in comparison to some of these other handless decks. So for those of you who do like to play handless, for those of you who like to play more aggressive and just like to keep on playing cards during their turn, this definitely seems to be the deck for you, and it's one that I think I will be trying out moving forward in some upcoming duels. Whether it's casual, or this kind of seems like the kind of deck that would be a lot of fun to play, maybe in silver rank or in gold rank, and see how far it could take you. Not really sure if this thing will really fare very well at all within the platinum rank, especially legendary rank. It's just not going to work. But still, this is just a really fun deck for those of you who are kind of on a budget within Duel Links and want to play a complete deck that really has a very straightforward but also potentially powerful strategy. This is one for you to try out, so I would suggest giving this a shot. Like I said, the whole deck list here is 2 Swift Gaia, 3 Theban Nightmare, 2 Archfiend Palabyrinth, 3 Goblin Thief, 3 Hinotama, 3 Soul of the Pure, 3 Cup of Ace, and your 1 copy of Restructor Revolution. So, like I said, really simple setup, really easy to use, and I really like this deck, actually. I really kind of like this whole setup. So, if you've run a deck similar to this one, or if there's, if you have your own take on a similar handless deck, I'd really like to hear about it. Feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at YuGiOh Deck Talk. Again, it's all one word, at YuGiOh Deck Talk, and I'd love to talk about your specific deck build, see what's worked best for you, and potentially talk about it in an upcoming episode. But anyway, that's it for today's episode. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.